All right,
Yes,
20
yes.
seconds from now.
Okay. Hello and a warm welcome to everyone for the final week of the Oral Diagnosis and Radiology Weekend Webinar Series. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Dr. Nirja and I'm working at Faculty of Dentistry, AIMS University, Malaysia, and I'll be the moderator for today's webinar session along with Dr. Ravi, who will be my co-host. Before we start, I would like you all to, I would request the audience to bear with us at times because we may expect minor technical hitches due to the speakers logging in from different time zones. We have successfully reached the final week of the 5-week weekend webinar series, and this would not have been possible without the support of our enthusiastic participants, the speakers and panelists who have been with us and supported us throughout all these 5 weeks of learning. I also take this opportunity to express my sincere thanks to the management of AIMS University Malaysia and happy to partner with Amropin India for giving us invaluable support and guidance to conduct this webinar series. Coming to today's topic. Today's topic is on sleep apnea. Don't let poor sleep become our worst nightmare by Dr. Priyadarshini Karthikeyan from Malaysia. Dr. Priyadarshini, she's my colleague in Malaysia at AIMS University. She has done her BDS and MDS Oral Medicine Radiology from Bharat University, India, and is currently working at Faculty of Dentistry, AIMS University, Malaysia. She is currently pursuing her PhD in metagenomic study on the effect of environmental tobacco smoke on dysbiosis of oral microbiota and oral health of children. She also has a fellowship in orofacial pain and sleep apnea from Smile USA and Roseman University, USA. She has numerous publications in various national and international journals. She has Malaysian national grant for her research in dentistry. In addition to it, she also has many AIMS internal grants for various research activities, and she has creative and innovative skills in designing case-based learning and problem-based learning for undergraduates. She is also involved in gamification of dentistry by implementing teaching through games and motivating critical thinking for students. We welcome Dr. Priya. It's a pleasure having you here. In addition to, before we get started, a little housekeeping. And the upcoming talk is tomorrow, that is on 2nd August. It is a role on physiotherapy in TMD and cervicogenic headaches by Ms. Sheila. Before we start, a little housekeeping. Dr. Priya's presentation will be followed by a panel discussion by 3 panel experts who will share their knowledge and expertise on the current topic. Our panel experts for the day include Prof. Shivan Satish, Dr. Varun Kunte, Dr. Prasanna Kumar. We welcome you all. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them in the Facebook comment box. We'll bring them up during the panel discussion. And we also have questions in the end. We have some time for the questions in the end. So now, without further delay, we will turn the time over to today's presenter, Dr. Priya, to share her knowledge on the subject matter. Welcome, Dr. Priya.
Thank you, Dr. Neeraja. Can I share the screen now? I think I'm audible. Are you able to see my slides?
Yes, Dr.
Yes, Dr. Priya, you're audible.
And we can see your screen.
Yes, thank you so much. A warm welcome And hello to the participants and the panelists of today. I am Dr. Priyadarshini Karthikeyan from AIMS University, Malaysia. I would like to thank, excuse me, I would like to thank the organizers, the AIMS University, Malaysia and AMROP in India for giving me a wonderful opportunity for expressing my views about sleep apnea and to speak about this wonderful topic. Thank you. And before I start, I would like to give a disclaimer note that the information contained in this webinar is not substituted for any professional medical advice, diagnosis, and treatment. It is purely only for educational purposes only. Before I get into the topic, I would like to tell you where I'm from. I did my undergraduation and post-graduation from Sri Balaji Dental College and Hospital, that is the Bharat University, which is in Chennai, India. And now currently I work in this, the second picture is my beautiful campus of AIMS University in Malaysia. I work here for the Faculty of Dentistry as a lecturer and a consultant for oral medicine and radiology. I would like to thank, I'll take this opportunity to thank my guide and head of the department, Dr. Nalini Ashwath, for unleashing, she is my head of the department and guide in Sri Balaji Dental College, for unleashing the potential in me. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much for your support through this ways. And I would like to thank the AIMS University and AIMS University Malaysia for providing me a very good opportunity. I would like to acknowledge Dr. Davis, Dr. Iyer, and Dr. Gary for enlightening me what is the sleep apnea is all about and orofacial pain through their fellowship program, which is organized by Smile USA and Rossman University. Thank you. And this is the right time I should acknowledge my mentors. So, coming to the topic, we all know that sleep is the most beautiful thing. And as of for me, the sleep is the most beautiful thing which can ever happen. And the sleep affects almost every tissue in our bodies. Some experts say that growth, stress hormones, our immune system, appetite, blood pressure, cardiovascular disease, everything is being affected by the sleep. Researchers show that lack of sleep will cause increase in obesity, heart disease, and infections. So there are 4 stages of sleep: stage 1, 2, 3, and 4. Stage 1, 2, and 3 are called as non-rapid eye movement stages, where there is no eye movements, which you can appreciate in the sleep. Whereas stage 4 is the rapid eye movement. So stage 1, 2, and 3 is where your transition period begins with the wakefulness and the sleep, and where your body temperature drops, your blood pressure drops, as well as your brain will be into the sleep mode, and all your muscles of your body will be relaxed. Whereas the stage 4, that is the REM sleep, is where your brain becomes more active and your body will be relaxing and the muscles will be relaxed. And this is the REM sleep is where you get lots of dreams. So there are several disorders which will affect us only during this REM sleep, like insomnia, sleep-related breathing disorder, sleep-wake disorders, and parasomnias. So for during a sleep episode, we will be having about 4 or 5 cycles of all the 4 stages. So any disturbances during this sleep or in this 4 stages will lead to lots of disorders. So what is apnea? It is a cessation of breathing. During apnea, there is no movement of the muscles of inhalation and the volume of the lungs initially remains unchanged. So just to say there is a cessation of breathing which is called as apnea. to put the whole thing into what is sleep apnea. Sleep apnea is irregular breathing during your sleeping with snoring pattern lead to something called as apnea, that is cessation of breathing. You will have irregular breathing with a snoring pattern while sleeping, which leads to inability to get restful sleep. To put it in a very, very simple terms. The sleep disordered breathing is divided into two: obstructive breathing disorders and non-obstructive breathing disorders. Obstructive breathing disorder, as the name suggests, is also called as obstructive sleep apnea, where, as the name suggests, there is some obstruction in the airway passage. Whereas non-obstructive breathing disorders is also called as central sleep apnea. As the name tells us that it is centrally controlled, that is, it is controlled by the central nervous system, that is your brain. And during the, Next is the obstructive sleep apnea. So what is obstructive sleep apnea? It is the most commonest one which you will look into it. And when we breathe, the air passes through the nose, nasopharynx, laryngopharynx, and into the pharynx. Any blockage in the airway passage may be because of allergies, overjet, overweight, swollen adenoids or tonsils, or hormonal changes will lead to narrowing or obstruction of the airway passage. This narrowing of the airway passage is called as obstructive sleep apnea. That is, it has been obstructed by some anatomical structures or something. So in normal patients, during their normal patients, during your normal sleep, the muscles that control the tongue and the soft palate will hold the airway open. The first picture shows that. And when the muscles relax during your sleep, when the muscles are relaxing, the airway becomes narrowed, and so it leads to snoring and breathing difficulties. And OSA, which is also called, which is an abbreviation for obstructive sleep apnea. If the muscles relax too much, the airway will be collapsed completely, thereby becoming blocked and obstructing the breathing. So that is the reason we can hear the snoring as well as breathing cessation for the apnea patients. Central sleep apnea. Central sleep apnea is completely controlled by central nervous system. Your brain, the respiratory center of your brain, it actually controls the lungs or your respiratory system, thereby stopping the breathing for 10 to 30 seconds. So there are two types of, to put everything together, there are two types of sleep apnea. One is obstructive sleep apnea, the other one is central sleep apnea, where central sleep apnea is completely not of concern for a dentist. Why? Because it is completely controlled by the central nervous system. So if you see any patients with the central sleep apnea, kindly refer them to a sleep specialist. Whereas obstructive sleep apnea is any obstruction in your airway passage, maybe anatomical structures, maybe non-anatomical structures. There are many various reasons. That is the most purview of where the dentist plays a very important role in treating these patients. So for the rest of my presentation, when I'm going to talk about sleep apnea, I'm pretty sure I'm going to focus more on obstructive sleep apnea, which is going to be a dentist point of view. So any sleep apnea may result in impaired glucose metabolism, lipid metabolism, systemic inflammation, cardiovascular disturbances like hypertension, stroke, congestive heart failure, arterial fibrillation, excessive daytime sleepiness, increased risk of motor vehicle accidents. If you don't have a restful sleep, you may be drowsing when you're driving, so it may lead to motor traffic accidents, impaired quality of life, depression, and cognitive impairment. You will not be able, as our forefathers have mentioned, a restful sleep is more important for us. If you don't have a restful sleep or a good sleep, the very next day you are going to mess up the whole day. So that is what the science also tells us now. Pathophysiology. Pathophysiology for obstructive sleep apnea. I'll make a point again, like for the rest of my presentation, when I'm going to talk about apnea or sleep apnea, it's going to be referred to as obstructive sleep apnea or OSA. So pathophysiology for OSA is upper airway anatomy or physiology. Any changes in the upper airway anatomy or physiology, or there may be many anatomic factors which can cause sleep apnea and non-anatomic factors. Upper airway anatomy and physiology. As we all know what is the airway passage is all about, I'm not getting into it. The combination of structural upper airway narrowing, any structural narrowing of the airway, or neuromotor tonicity, abnormal or incoordination of the tonicity of the airway passage will lead to obstructive sleep disorder. Anatomical factors like retrognathic, micrognathia, large tongue or increased or any discrepancies in the arch size, macroglossia, steep soft palate drape, or presence of any mandibular torus, so the space occupied by the tongue is being reduced, so the tongue falls back when the patient is in the sleeping position, that is in the supine position, and decrease in the vertical dimension, and V-shaped, V-arched palates. These are all the anatomical factors which can be a cause for obstructive sleep apnea. So this all comes into a purview of a dentist. So we can treat all these factors and help the patient to recover from the sleep apnea and its associated disorders. The very important next anatomical factor which we need to consider is the neck circumference. The circumference of the neck is what is more important in the case of obstructive sleep apnea. So the second picture will clearly show you like what I'm talking about. The magnitude of the extraluminal tissue pressure depends on the interaction of the upper airway soft tissues and the bony compartment. So in the normal patient, when the soft tissue is also normal, that is, the tissue surrounding your neck is normal and the bony enclosure is your pharynx. So there is no narrowing of the pharynx and the airway remains competent and it is well good. In the obesity patients, where the soft tissue is more, okay, and the bony enclosure, that is the pharynx, is going to be the same size, the soft tissue, the excess soft tissue is going to pressurize the bony enclosure, thereby narrowing the airway passage. That is the reason you can see OSA in lots of obesity patients. And we also know like the obesity patients have a tendency to snore at nights, not only at nights, whenever they sleep. And with small mandible and maxilla, when the soft tissue is also small, when the bony enclosure is also small, that itself will lead to narrowing of the airway passage. So these are the very important factors which has to be considered when you see a sleep apnea patient. When the patient comes to you, or when the patient, I feel the awareness that nowadays the patient don't come to you and tell a dentist that you don't have a restful sleep. But we can make it into a practice to get a sleep history of a sleep and how it goes if you're really talented enough, and you can serve the community as well as the society by helping them to diagnose early. Non-anatomic factors like respiratory rhythm, head posture, and genetics play a very important role for these. These things are not into our constraint. When there is a respiratory rhythm or something, we advise the patient, we send them to ENT specialist or a sleep specialist. What are the symptoms? Yes, doctor, I'm ready. I want to do early diagnosis of these patients. Yes, even my mother's knows. So like, I want to know like what it is. So we have to know what are the symptoms which you can see into the patient. we can divide into daytime symptoms and nocturnal symptoms. Nocturnal symptoms like snoring, witnessed apneas by your bed partner. So your bed partner will be definitely, when you're taking a history of this patient, it's very important you call the patient's partner to get the history of the whole scenario. Why? Because the people who snore, the patient who snored, actually they don't know, they don't realize that they're actually snoring or they're having apneic episodes, whereas the bed partner will be the best person to tell you. So it's very important when you're taking an history, you need to talk with the family members as such. Nocturnal choking, snorting or gasping, nocturnal reflex, bruxism, insomnia, enuresis, nocturia, frequent arousals, diaphoresis, and impotence. And there are some daytime symptoms. You can ask the patient, like excessive daytime sleepiness. Yes, I think majority of the people have excessive daytime, but this is completely different. This is sleepiness. It is not lethargic. And fatigue, memory impairment, personality changes, nausea, morning headaches, depression. And in physical examination, we have to check for the obesity and the neck size, that is circumference of the neck. If it is greater than 17 inches, then the patient is considered to be obese. If it is greater than 16 inches for women. And the BMI should be, if it is greater than 35 years, they are obese and they are highly prone for sleep apnea. And any craniofacial anatomy like retrognathia, micrognathia, tonsillar hypertrophy, macroglossia, inferior displacement of the hyoid bone, narrowing of the oropharyngeal airway, or any drug-resistant hypertension, which you can clinically see into the patient. So these are the signs and symptoms which we can see in our daily patients when we are taking a history. So whatsoever the patient chief complaint is, when you're really interested, when you suspect apnea in some patients, I would do it in my practice that I'll make sure I'll get a sleep history from the patient. Who are the patients at high risk for obstructive sleep apnea? The patients who are obese with a BMI of greater than 35, they are highly prone or they are at high risk of sleep apnea. Congestive heart disease or heart failure, refractory hypertension, where the patient has abnormal hypertension, it increases, it reduces at times. There is no proper control of hypertension. And if you can see these patients clinically, we have to think that they are at the high risk of apnea or they are having a sleep apnea issue. Type 2 diabetes, nocturnal dysarrhythmias, stroke, pulmonary hypertension, and high-risk driving populations. So when we are seeing a patient in a clinic, so what we do, what is the protocol I follow? I'm just sharing, there are many protocols and there are different schools of thoughts regarding this, but this is what I follow and I would like to share this. So when I see a patient, first I'll divide them whether they are at high risk for OSA, and I'll record the symptoms, the complaints of the patient. And if they're positive for sleep disorder symptoms, OSA risk evaluation should be done using the assessment sheets, which I'll be like talking in the rest of the slides. And if the dentist or somebody who cannot treat the patient, kindly refer the patient to the sleep specialist or the dentist who can really take care. If you are well versed in diagnosing the case, yes, proceed the patient to a sleep study. Sleep study is just an investigation which is done by polysomnography, which I'll be like speaking in the rest of the slides. And once you do this investigation, it gives you a value which is something called as apnea hypopnea index. Based upon the indexes, you can distinguish whether they have OSA or not. If yes, if the patient have apnea, Then discuss the treatment options with the patient. And the first treatment of choice is CPAP, which I'll be again I'll be like explaining you in the treatment protocol. The patients who are not tolerant to CPAP will be given alternative therapies like lifestyle modification. If the patient is an obese patient, you ask the patient to reduce the weight. That itself will relieve the patient from the sleep apnea. If the patient is a moderate sleep apnea case, a lifestyle change, a lifestyle modification will help them to go for a mild case. Surgical, which is the last and the most least used therapy, and behavior or positional therapy or oral appliance. So this is a protocol which I follow and I would like to share with you all. So how do you assess? Yes, I have seen the clinical symptoms. I'm like done. I know like this patient is a sleep apnea patient, but still there are some self-assessed questionnaires which you need to document it when you're suspecting sleep apnea for the patient. The first thing is the stop bank. There are many assessment forms which I'm going to speak only about 3 assessments. The first is stop bank questionnaire. Stop bank questionnaire is nothing but there will be like 8 questions and the patient will be given this questionnaire to mark whether yes or no. Like, do you snore loudly? Do you often feel tired? You have anyone observed you stop breathing during the sleep? You have been treated for high blood pressure? And there are bang questions like BMI, age, circumference of the neck, and gender. You can ask the patient to fill up this questionnaire with a yes or no. Like each yes will be counted as 1 point, and they are being like you can grade the patient as the low risk, intermediate risk, and the high risk patients. So this gives you a proper evidence or the proper assessment protocol for you to come to a confirmation that it is a sleep apnea patient. The most commonly used and a good gold standard assessment is EP Worth Sleepiness Scale, which we are following, where the patient is given 8 questions and patient is given a rating of 0 to 3. Patient can select any one of the rating, where 0 would never doze and 1 is a slight chance of dozing, 2 is moderate chance of dozing, and 3 is high chance of dozing. So as a patient and mark it, and you get a total score and you can rate the whether they are at low risk, moderate risk, or at high risk. The other assessment which we clinically see is using Mallampati score. Yeah, Mallampati score. When you ask a patient, you can actually see this into the patient's mouth. So as a dentist, we do this in our practice. So you ask the patient to open the mouth, you see clinically, and divide it into class 1 to class 4. Class 1 is complete visualization of the soft palate. Class 2 is complete visualization of the uvula. You'll be able to see the uvula. This class 1 and class 2, if you see a class 1 and class 2 and still the patient is snoring, you can put them in mild apnea cases. They are grade 1 or mild. Class 3, visualization of only the base of the uvula, where it is a moderate type of OSA, so definitely the patient will be snoring. And class 4, where the soft palate is not visible at all, is the place where it leads to a severe type of apnea. So, yes, it's all right. So I've seen the symptoms, have assessed the patient. Now I have to be sure whether it's really sleep apnea. Why? Because you're going to treat them for life. So before you go for that, the gold standard investigation which they do for apnea is polysomnography. It is recorded during sleep. The goal of the PSG is to quantify the amount of time spent in sleep during night and changes in the sleep. PSG includes electroencephalography to assess the architecture, sleep stages, your arousal whenever you wake up at night, along with electromyography, electroculogram, airflow, pulse oximetry, respiratory effort, electrocardiographic tracing, body positioning, and snoring. Everything has been recorded in these sleep studies. The very important advantage of this studies is it is performed in an overnight period, which is very comfortable for the patient. This PSG will give us a reading which is something called as AHI. AHI is nothing but apnea or hypoapnea index. Whereas apnea is a complete cessation of breathing, whereas hypoapnea is a partial cessation of breathing per hour of sleep. So when you're seeing a sleep study results, it will be a lots of graphs which is only read by a sleep specialist. So using the apnea hypoapnea ratings, they will be dividing into normal. If it is less than 5, it is normal. 5 to 15, it is mild sleep apnea. And 15 to 30, it is moderate sleep apnea. And if it is greater than 30, it is considered to be severe sleep apnea. Yeah. What are the treatment protocols? There are many treatment protocols, but the main 5 subdivisions are positive airway pressure, upper airway surgical procedures, pharmacologic treatment, oral appliances, and behavioral management or modification like weight loss, alcohol avoidance, alteration of the sleeping position. Out of all these treatments, as we are in the as our web series is about oral medicine and diagnosis, and so I'm not getting into the treatment procedures or pharmacological treatment or something. I'm going to talk only about 2 important treatment procedures, that is positive airway pressure and the oral appliances. Positive airway pressure, you can see it in the picture where the patient is given a nasal mask or a oronasal mask, and a positive pressure is being pumped from outside using this machine. Okay, so the increase in the pressure, which is being sent passively by the machine, which will relax and opens up the narrowed airway passage, thereby increasing more breathing for the patient. It is a gold standard treatment, as well as this is the first treatment of choice for any apnea patients. But there is lots of disadvantages. Why? Because the portability of the whole machinery, and it makes lots of noise, and you can see it in the picture, and the patient is supposed to wear all this and sleep, so the patient cannot turn himself or herself while sleeping, and it is highly discomfort for the patient, and it is said like the patient competency compliance to the mission is very poor. So what we'll do for these patients? Why? Because this sleep apnea is a life-threatening disorder, so we have to really treat them. Then comes the invention of oral appliances. There are many companies which bring about the oral appliances and have just jotted the names. And what this oral appliance normally do, they reposition the tongue and they push the mandible forward, thereby opening the space. So you can see in this picture, we are repositioning the tongue, and the mandible is being pushed forward, thereby the airway is opened up. They are very good compliance with the patients, with oral appliance patients. Why? Because it has lots of advantages. Why? Because it's very handy, it's very light in weight, you can it's highly portable, and it is not going to intrude in your breathing, or you're not going to wear any equipments, and it is cost effective, and patients compliance is too good in these cases. And I'm not getting into the oral appliances as such. Why? Because our panelists are legends in managing the sleep apnea cases. So they will be like talking about how this works and what they do in their practice. And the sleep apnea, this oral appliances. So like how much you have to protrude the mandible? Is it something like you have to just protrude? No. We have something called a tapering. like you titrate it, you increase the extension of the mandible for the patient, where you can reach up to 65 to 70% of the mandible forward positioning, which is highly acceptable by the society. So I would like to conclude this talk that the sleep-related disorders emerge in childhood as well as adult. You can see your child snoring. If yes, kindly rule out the anatomic structures. You first differentiate whether it's an obstructive sleep apnea or it's a central sleep apnea. If it's obstructive sleep apnea, yes, it's definitely so. It's we can as a dentist we can help the kids to come out of it. They bear negative consequences on the physical, intellectual, and mental recreation during sleep, impairing daytime performance. So early diagnosis and increased awareness is needed to improve or to provide major improvements in many aspects of patients' quality of life and to improve survival. Thereby, you will decrease the morbidity and mortality of the associated diseases. So I think this talk is especially, this whole web series is being designed mainly for the students, that is the undergraduates who have no idea as like what the sleep apnea is. This I really feel that this talk would have given you a brief introduction as like what sleep apnea is and what a dentist can do here, what is the role of the dentist in diagnosing come to a conclusion and then treat the patient. These are my references. And thank you for spending so much of time and patience for this talk. Back to the host.
Thank you, Dr. Priya, for sharing your experiences on the current topic. Now, I would like to ask all the panelists to switch on the videos and unmute themselves for the discussion. Thank you. Today, we have three panel experts for this webinar session. Professor Dr. Sivan Satish. Hello. MDS. Hello, sir. MDS with an MFDS from Glasgow in 2007. He is an alumnus of Rajas Dental College. Currently, he is a professor and head for the Department of Oral Medicine and Radiology at Chettinad Dental College, Chennai. Dr. Sivan Satish has many years of experience in the field of oral medicine and radiology. He is very active in academics and has authored several publications, both nationally and internationally. He is interested in recent trends and has a good hold on dental management of medically complex individuals and on prevention and treatment of tobacco-induced potential oral malignant disorders. Welcome, Prof. The second panelist for the day is Dr. Varun Kunte. Dr. Varun Kunte has completed his MDS in the field of oral medicine and maxillofacial radiology. He is the founder and director of Arthros, a chain of headache, migraines, and facial pain, TMJ, bite, and posture correction clinics in Mumbai. He is a consultant specialist in orofacial pain and TMD in various hospitals in Maharashtra. He is the second doctor from Asia outside North America to receive prestigious DTR certification from Dr. Ben Sutter himself. And he is at present the only DTR certified doctor in Mumbai. He also practices neuromuscular dentistry and is a member of ICCMO, which is the largest organization in the world for neuromuscular dentistry. Welcome, Dr. Varun.
Thank
And I would like to introduce our third panelist for the day, Dr. Prasanna Kumar. He has passed out from the prestigious Madras Dental College, and currently he is working at Adi Parashakti Dental College. Currently, Dr. Prasanna Kumar is handling undergraduates with innovative teaching techniques to encourage students in thinking and promote discussion in college, and has received high remarks on creativity of classroom lessons, classroom lesson plans, both from students and from the management. His area of expertise are clinical and radiographic diagnosis of conditions affecting the maxillofacial region, including TMDs, oral mucosal lesions, potentially malignant disorders, and oral cancer, along with expertise in diagnosing and managing medically complex patients and providing consistent quality dental care. Welcome, Dr. Prasanna.
you. Thank you, sir.
So we welcome you all. Thank you, Dr. Priya, again. We'll go ahead and take some questions from the audience. Just a reminder to the audience to post in your questions in the Facebook comment section. And looks like we have a few questions already from the audience who have been watching this webinar. The first question is directed towards the speaker, Dr. Priya. One of the audience asks, the etiopathogenesis on the relationship between sleep apnea and cardiovascular disease. Could you please enlighten us on this?
All right. So sleep apnea is, as we said, the cessation of breathing. This respiratory events will cause activation of the sympathetic nervous system in our body. So what is the activation of sympathetic nervous system is it increases your heart rate, your blood pressure, and your pulse rate. So obviously it is a main risk factor for developing a cardiovascular disease. So this is the etiopathogenesis relationship between apnea cases and cardiovascular disease.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Priya. And there's one question. I think the Dr. Varun can enlighten us. One of the audience asked, what is the treatment with mandibular advancement device? Any other panelists can also shed their light on this, but one of the panelists is
Okay.
Yeah, please, thank you.
Okay. Basically, mandibular advancement devices, as the name suggests, they advance the mandible. Along with the mandible comes the tongue. So tongue is also advanced. What happens is at night, when you go to bed, when you sleep, the tongue goes back and obstructs the airway. So the basic idea is that the obstruction caused by this tongue should be relieved and person should be able to breathe free. So mandibular advancement devices, along with bringing the mandible forward, they bring the tongue forward as well, relieve the obstruction and make the breathing simple. That is how they relieve the obstructive sleep apnea.
Thank you, Dr. Varun. One of these questions was directed towards Prof. Sivan. They ask, how do you do radiographic investigations for sleep apnea? Please.
You can go for you can start from conventional radiographic investigation. A variety of studies has been going on by finding out, detecting the airway obstruction, the size of the airway by orthopantogram by itself. A lot of studies are going on. So we can assess the breadth of the airway by OPG. Starting from the conventional radiograph. Actually, this is a very simple procedure. We can do it in our clinic. In the advanced mode of investigation, we can go for MRI. It will be a best mode of investigation. The MRI, in the MRI, we can get two data you can get. One data in the normal MRI, the grayscale MRI, what you can get is, we can find out the soft tissue pattern. That is the tonicity of the pharyngeal muscles that you can study by normal MRI and conventional MRI. In the functional MRI, you can study the brain pattern, function of the brain. here is very important. In the case of polysomnography investigation also, we are actually trying to find out the EEG, that pattern of brain waves pattern. This will be an added data. This will support, it will act as a gold standard for polysomnography, that functional MRI imaging. The functional MRI imaging will give you the function of brain and each spike that will give you some spikes. It won't be look like a normal MRI. The functional MRI will give some rhythm of the brain. So we can assess, we can differentiate the normal function of the people with the normal the activities and the people with some stress. Basically, the sleep apnea is actually a novel disease, versatile. What have the etiopathogenesis will be always cyclical. Stress will induce apnea, and the apnea will induce stress. It goes like this, hand in hand. So what we can see that the MRI, functional MRI, you can see tremendous changes in that wave activities. So based on that, it can act as a prognosis. Prognosis also not only a treatment investigational procedure. This functional MRI, we can take before treatment and after treatment and during treatment also. So it can be act as a preventive, interceptive, and curative also. So while going on with the treatment, you can again go for a functional MRI and you can find out whether the treatment path is right or we are going the right path or what. So it can act as a prognostic factor, prognosis indicator also. So this is all the investigation we can do. Currently, they are doing enormous research in the functional MRI, I think.
I think
That's
Dr.
role
Prasanna
investigation.
has something to
That
say.
is just one more thing that I would like to add upon this. Actually, there is another newer technique which is called as acoustic imaging, which uses radio frequency pulse. Actually, it is quite a non-invasive procedure by which you can find out the, like the airway dimensions as such. So it will be better. There is something called a spheryngometer and a rhinometer. Rhinometer we will be using it for nose and nasopharynx, whereas in rhinometer we will be using for larynx and pharynx, oropharynx as such. So that is a non-invasive procedure which could also be used to titrate the oral appliances as such, because we will be titrating it arbitrarily. So if you could titrate it on a patient on a daily basis, we would be able to rectify the thing much more, what to say, like before the sleep study, we will be able to diagnose it. So that is how your this thing functions. And one more thing about the oral appliance mechanism, just like what Varun sir was explaining, to make it much more simpler, I would like to say it is more like a jaw thrust maneuver, what we do in a apnea patient. So naturally what we do is open the mandible and we put the mandible, we pull the mandible forward. So to create the airway patency. So that is exactly what we're trying to achieve in an oral appliance.
Thank you, Prof. and Dr. Prasanna for enlightening us. There's one specific question from Prof. Sivan again. They ask, what is the imaging used for diagnosis of sleep apnea for neuromuscular, I think it's about neuromuscular imaging.
That already explained as such, that we can go for that. You can also go for a contrast MRI so that it can highlight is there any constriction where any web is there or what. You can find out all the, even you can sometimes what happens, tonsillar, we are often missing this. The tonsillar in children's, more often in children's, the basic the risk factor, which is the most common risk factor, is the tonsillar enlargement. These are the things we can, soft tissue. Basically, we should go for a soft tissue investigation. Now, we have to assess the soft tissue pattern. That is very important. So, when you go for a soft tissue, the gold standard is always MRI, magnetic resonance imaging. That can be an act as a gold standard. That's what earlier I told. So, we can go. These are the neuromuscular imaging you can go for. Thank you, Prof.
Some of these questions are open for all the panelists, but there's one question that one of the audience especially asked the speaker. Is sinusitis associated with sleep apnea?
Sinusitis is not associated. Why? Because sinusitis is inflammation of the sinus itself. And the sleep apnea is going to be like a chronic. The patient is going to have it for some months and years together, where sinusitis is seasonal. So that is the main difference to different, even sinusitis would lead to cessation of breathing. Yes, we understand, but it is only for a season. And there is other causes for sinusitis, whereas for sleep apnea, it also relates with the snoring. And there's, as I have mentioned, there's a lot more other symptoms which we have to follow. and differentiate whether it is because of sinusitis or it is a sleep apnea as such.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. K. One more question. To the
So
speaker
here,
again.
here you
Yes, sir.
can.
Please. Sorry. Please continue, Prof. Sorry.
The same question. This question I wanted to. It is a little interesting question, tricky question actually. Who asked the group question actually. Here the thing is, maxillary. You should look into the different angle here. We should not look into maxillary, whether maxillary sinusitis is causing apnea or what. You should not look into this angle. We should think into this. We should look into this angle. Whether which causes maxillary sinusitis. We should look into this angle. So the maxillary sinusitis may be caused by allergy, but it can also, its main factor, one of the most common factors is nasal septal deviation also could be a factor for causing maxillary sinusitis. So if you look into the etiological way, you can come to also there's a possibility that it can cause an apnea because the nasal septal deviation, sometimes most commonly 60% of the patients having S-shaped the nasal septum. So that could be that can act as a causative factor for apnea also. But you should not look into whether maxillary sinusitis cause. If the question is like that, whether maxillary sinusitis specifically causes which, no. If it is due to the maxillary sinusitis occurs due to nasal septal deviation or any other structural abnormality in the nasal pattern, the nasal anatomical variation, then it can cause a sleep apnea. So structural anatomical variation is very important factor here.
Thank you. Thanks, Prof. This question is directed towards Dr. Varun. The audience would like to have more information on oral appliances. Please.
Okay. So oral appliances are nothing but some appliances which we are, let's take an example of one appliance that I regularly use. I use an appliance called as silencer. So it is an appliance where you have a acrylic appliance on the maxilla, acrylic appliance on the mandible, and it is connected by an acrylic connector. Okay. Before fabricating such an appliance, what we usually do is we relax the musculature using ultra low frequency TENS, followed by EMG. We check the muscle readings on EMG to make sure that muscles have achieved the necessary relaxation. Along with a certain bite record protocol, we make sure we record the bite in a particular advanced position of the mandible. That cast and along with that bite registration is sent to the lab. Lab manufactures this appliance and sends it back to us. Now, some of the appliances can be titrated, as in the connector that you have applied can be removed and it can be reattached. Some of the appliances you cannot titrate. Okay, so that depends on each company and kind of appliances that you're using. But as I said, or as Dr. Prasanna said, the idea is to maintain the patency of the airway by bringing the jaw forward to an extent that it doesn't cause any facial strain or musculature strain on the facial or head muscles. So that is the appliance therapy by and large. There are a number of appliances, as I think the speaker has already mentioned, Somnodent, Silencer, so many of them. So you can use any of them and all of them will get your mandible ahead, open up the airway. If the obstruction is caused by retruded mandible, only then. If the obstruction is in the upper airway, then no.
Thank you, Dr. Varun. This question is to Dr. Prasanna. They're asking if there are any definitive subjective symptoms that patients can rely on apart from the poor sleep quality in the case of sleep apnea.
Subjective symptoms, I would say the patient tiredness. If the patient is very fatigued, if there is any TMJ pain after getting up from bed, and if the patient partner complains of constant snoring for a very long time or it's very loud, and if the patient arouses at times in times of sleeping, so where you have apneic events in between, so that is one of the very important subjective symptoms, I would say.
Okay, thank you. There's one more question, Dr. Prasanna, and it says to elaborate on the details, they would like you to elaborate on the details of the standard positive pressure machines.
Okay. Okay.
Please.
I mean, you're talking about CPAP, right?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. CPAP, we have actually mainly we have two kinds. We have BiPAP and APAP. BiPAP is like where the inspiratory pressure and the expiratory pressure are different based on it, because for inspiration and expiration, the pressure varies. Whereas in a standard CPAP, it's going to be constant throughout. And there is something called as APAP. APAP is like an automatic machine which senses your breathing, and based on that, the system will decide what kind of pressure you will have to use for it. And for CPAP mechanism, I would like to say it in a much more simpler manner. CPAP, generally they have a mindset, patients and students, they have a thought that CPAP actually just shoves the air into your throat and to reach the lung, but it's not that way. The CPAP generally, like it just balloons your airway, so whereby it facilitates your airway obstruction if there is anything as such. So that's what CPAP mechanism in a much more simpler manner.
Thank you, Dr. Prasanna, for your knowledge in this. Dr. Priya, this question for you. Do you have any biomarkers for sleep apnea?
Biomarkers as such, biomarkers, these are just inflammatory. Cystine and homocysteine, some studies have said like cystine and homocysteine levels will be increased in sleep apnea patients, and there will be increase in the inflammatory markers, general markers, and nothing much as such. This is what the research says.
One question again for the speaker. It says, are there any contraindications for oral appliances like mandibular advancement device?
There is no as such contraindication, since you want the side effects.
Yes, please.
Yeah, patient, definitely the patient who is going to wear, we are going to put him on oral appliance will have TMJ pain. Why? Because you're protruding the mandible forward, and the patient will have myofascial pain, tooth pain. There'll be like lots of drooling of saliva, that is, the salivate more. When your mouth is open, obviously you will drool, and there'll be TMJ noises and sounds, and patient can complain of dry mouth. Why? Because the patient is mouth breathing that time, and gum irritation, and these are the majority of side effects of this oral appliance. But when we weigh between the value of life when compared to these side effects, I think the value of life is more important than taking care of these side effects.
Thank you. This one, Dr. Varun,
I
one of the audience
ask
asks.
point,
Please. Sorry. Please continue, Dr. Prasanna.
regarding this, actually, here I asked me which are the contraindications. Basically, it is contraindicated for class 3 patients, skeletal malocclusion, I think, class 3 patients, class 3 malocclusion. So already it is programmatic and you can't go for, it is like basically the mandibular advancement thing is modified activator only. Activator applies which you are using that will pull the jaw out. So that only they are using in clinics basically. So the class 3 malocclusion cases, we can go for this type of thing. Another thing, malocclusion is the V-shaped arches. Also, we can go for this thing. Another thing is epilepsy. The patient with epilepsy, we can't go for the oral appliances. This apnea, sleep apnea, is always going in hand with seizure. For 80% of the patient is suffering from epilepsy, stress-related brain activity, abnormal brain activity. So this point I have to add with this thing. Another one thing I wanted to add with that pressure system what you spoke about is another system is that PEEP is that PEEP. That is positive end expiratory pressure maintenance in the lung. That also will be helpful. That is coming out. It's an under study. It's an advanced technique. That also I wanted to add with that what you asked the previous question, the pressure system question. PEEP is that.
Thank you so very much.
One more thing that I would like to
giving that
just add
additional
upon.
information. Thank you. Yes, Dr. Prasanna, please.
Yes, there is just one more thing. If the patient is oral submucous fibrose patient, then there is another problem because the patient won't have a normal mouth opening as such. We should have a minimum of 40 millimeter mouth opening, and your lateral and protrusive movements for the TMJ should be around some 8 millimeter to be minimum for designing any oral appliances as such. So that is one more thing that I would like to add upon. And in these patients, there is something called as, it's a newer technique, it's still under study. There is something called as hypoglossal nerve stimulation. So it's an upcoming study. We can use that in case of any OSM patients.
Yes, doctor, very well said. Actually, the hypoglossal nerve we call it as a buffer nerve. Actually, that one another glossopharyngeal and hypoglossal, that also we call it as. Again, one another point which he told is correct. One point which I wanted to mention is the oral submucous fibrosis. He told about the mouth opening should be normal. Oral submucous, which day-to-day clinical practice, they are coming across this patient, very prevalent in AC population. The oral submucous fibrosis patient, we can't construct this type of oral appliances. So another thing, another school of thought which I wanted to put here is these patients, sleep apnea patients, are also suffering from bruxism. So they are under stress and they are suffering from bruxism. So what happens? There will be already there will be deficit of vertical height of occlusion. So definitely 90% of patients will be suffering from temporomandibular joint internal derangement. Definitely it could be definitely 90% they will be suffering from either arthritis, TMJ arthritis, or otherwise with the temporomandibular disc displacement. Such patients we can't go for oral appliances. These are the limitations for oral appliances. I think. That's all.
Thank you. Thanks, Prof. Thanks, Dr. Prasanna. There's one question for Dr. Varun, and one of the audience is asking whether it is whether thumb sucking and oral sleep apnea, do they have any relation? Please.
Well, not that I know of. If any other panelists want to come on this, they can.
Yes, please. It's open for all the panelists, but that question was actually asked.
Yes, we need to talk about
yes, sir, please, sir. No, sir, please, sir, you can use it.
Please, Prof. Please.
Okay. Here, what happens? We can think in this term. See, in the thumb sucking habit, the patient always developing nasal, the oral breathing. So, what happens when they are not using their nasal cavity or nasal root for breathing? Here, what happens? Two things are happening. The tonicity, upper respiratory tract muscle tonicity is not in their control. So that is a very risky factor. First one is tonsils enlargement, and second thing is the loss of upper respiratory tract motor tonicity. That is very important point here in the risk factor for causing apnea. So in children, the thumb sucking habit leading to this loss of motor tonicity of upper respiratory musculature. That would be the reason.
In fact, one more thing, let me say that when you have a tongue sucking habit, it usually leads to the constricted arches that further encroaches on the tongue space. And as the tongue cannot fit in the palatal wall, it comes down on the mandible, and then patients have lateral tongue thrust. And then the tongue would naturally go back because there's no way it can go in front. So as it goes back, it further obstructs the airway. So that could also cause, a thumb sucking patient could be a potential sleep apnea patient as adult in adulthood.
Yeah, yes, doctor, can I please add a point to this? As we are seeing this thumb sucking habit and patients who have narrow arches, everything, we normally look into like they have to go for an ortho treatment for their aesthetic purpose. Nowadays, we have to create an awareness saying that there will be a potential future apneic cases. So that is the way we have to increase the awareness for the patient from the childhood. There are many patients which we have seen across in our practice where the kids will be having thumb sucking habit, and this habit would have caused lots of oral changes, abnormalities, or any orthodontic cases with malocclusion or something. We have to encourage and create awareness. That's what we are trying to do, shift their focus from aesthetics to a life-saving disorder.
And one more thing I could just add upon, I guess. Can I? Hello?
Yes.
Ah.
Hello?
Yes, sir. Actually, I'm talking about ortho treatments. There is a common procedure called as the premolar extraction. Actually, the premolar extraction would further constrict the arch. So it is better to, educate our fellow orthodontists about this, because there is high chances that the arch may get narrowed, and because of which the tongue would be pushed back. So to avoid this, they could go for arch expansion, or they could increase the VDO. And video increase also, it is more recommended in case of males. In females it is not recommended, because that itself can lead into like obstructive sleep apnea and other disorders as such. So that is one thing that I would like to just add upon.
You're muted.
Am I muted, sir?
No, doctor. I think the host has been muted.
Sorry, I'm sorry. This question is directed towards Prof. Shivan. One of the audience asks, patients who show narrowing of airway spaces on imaging, but don't show any signs or symptoms, should they be treated?
Good question, actually. Here only we are using the questionnaires, as Dr. Priyadarshini well said. We are asking for going for a history. That the questionnaire is also included in the history. Two things we are questionnaires we are adding. One is the Berlin questionnaire that will cover the apnea, hypopnea. So what happens? See, when you take any anatomical structure, when you go for a study, when you go for a anatomical structural study, we can't expect 100% normal structural level. Always there will be 5 to 10% variations. This is called variation. This is not abnormality. The narrowing is not pathological narrowing. This is variation in the size of that airway. So if I go with your question, if the patient having some narrowing in the airway, it is not normal. It is less than let it be 1%, 2%, not below the normal. So what I will do, I will go for a sleep questionnaire. That is, one is the Berlin questionnaire, as I told, apnea is the apnea and hypopnea is there or what. Once again, that apnea, normal individual, for us, it will be around 4 to 5. Every individual have apnea 4 to 5 per hour. But in the case when it exceeds 15 to 30, then I will go for the diagnosis of the thing. Again, another thing, Epworth question. That Epworth question, as Dr. Priyadarshini told, that question contains some common things what we do in daily, day-to-day, the routine. Like that need not to be the daily activity. Sometimes in a month, let us say like this, you should ask the patient question like this: have you ever slept while you're talking to someone? Have you ever slept while watching TV like that? These are the scores. These are the questionnaire. These are the questions they will ask in the Epworth questionnaire. So as I told earlier, this sleep apnea syndrome is a versatile disease. Here only you can see both insomnia in the night and narcolepsy in the daytime. Both sleeplessness and sleepiness, both the spectrum you can see here. So the questionnaire will help to arrive to a diagnosis that whether this narrowing of the airway passage is pathological or it is just a variation. This is how I will go for. Again, I will go for asking other symptoms like memory loss. Memory loss is there. Cognitive behavioral change is there or what? The memory loss is once again a very important the symptom in the sleep apnea patient. Then again, I'll go for snoring, all these things. Snoring also, you can take it as only 60 to 70%, but all the other added factors will give us more amount of weightage to arrive for a diagnosis, I think.
Thank you very much for your valuable inputs, Prof. And it looks like we have covered all of questions for this session. And I would like to ask Dr. Priya if there is anything else you would like to convey before we wrap up, please.
No, as such, I have already mentioned the early diagnosis is the key. The early we diagnose the case and we look into it, at least if you cannot treat the patient, kindly refer the patient. When the patient tells you like he's having apnea, I don't want the students or the newcomers to panic at that stage, and you should know like what it really means. That is what the purview of this webinar is all. And as the other panelists have discussed, saying that stress as well as sleep apnea works in hand. If that is the case, then actually
May I add something?
Yes, please. Yes, Dr. Ram, please go ahead, please.
Yeah, so I agree with Dr. Sivam sir about digging deeper. So in my part of the country, there's a saying that if you dig deep, you'll find gold. So what I want to say is that if you dig deeper, you may find some symptoms that patients may not be able to tell you, because a lot of times these symptoms are subjective. So in such cases, if we rely on objective assessment like PSG, like the speaker has already mentioned, and if we find anything wrong in the PSG and we further take it ahead with neuromuscular imaging, as Dr. Sivam sir has said, and if we find something, we treat it. If we don't treat it. Another thing, just my concluding remark I wanted to add is there is a very positive correlation between TMJ disorders and sleep apnea. And a lot of times it starts in the childhood when the child has a trauma to the TMJ or head or face, and the growth cartilage gets kind of affected. The mandible does not grow to its full potential. Let's not say it's abnormal, but then it's not the full potential. It causes a certain amount of retruded mandible, bit retrusion, and that can also lead to sleep apnea. I would like to note that Dr. Lareta, Dr. Matos have done an extensive research in this field. Those who are interested, they can just follow them on social media, and they keep on posting these good articles about how the damage to the TMJ can cause later sleep apnea.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Babu. Great. Thank you, everyone. We appreciate all of you being here, for this session. And thanks again for joining us today. And we'll see you tomorrow for another webinar session. Thank you, Prof. And Dr. Varun, thank you so much. And Dr. Prasanna, thank you so much for sitting with us, bearing with us, and
Can I just add one more thing, actually?
And Dr. Priya, you have been excellent. Thank you so very much.
thank Doctor.
So thank you very much. Until we see the next time, thank you.